I'm Robert Skinner from Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. I've spent the last 20 years trying to introduce ideas of water-sensitive urban design in Melbourne, and now I am the chair of the International Water Association's Cities of the Future program, and we are trying to put these principles on a global stage. I'm also chairman of WaterAid International, so one half of my life is involved in looking at cities in developed countries, such as Melbourne and Lyon. I also spend a lot of time working with WaterAid, looking at the development of cities in developing countries. There was a paper today on work being done in Lagos, where 70% of people live under the poverty line and are in need of dramatic improvement in their water systems. So I have an eye on both developing and the developed world. Certainly Novatech brings together some of the best thinkers in stormwater management. I also think it's important for people who work in the particular areas, if you like, the building blocks of sustainable cities, to think about how it all comes together to be implemented in practice. So how do you develop government policy? How do you develop regulations? How do you get bottom-up ownership of these principles by citizens in cities? So I have an interest in both the technical and also the socio-political aspects of water-sensitive urban design. So the future of cities is very much dependent on how dramatic climate change is and how dramatic population growth is in particular cities. Now, if you have a situation where we have in Australia, where we have significant reduction in rainfall and you have cities growing at a fairly constant rate, then you have to do things differently. And it's no longer sufficient to let the city grow and then think, oh, how shall we manage the water? You have to actually look at how the city's growing and at the same time think about the water systems that will provide the resilience and livability in those cities. So traditionally we haven't done that. Traditionally I worked at Melbourne Water, which is the major water company in Melbourne, and we really followed the development. The city was developed because of transport, education, work needs, and then the question was asked, oh, how do we provide water? Well, in Melbourne, we traditionally built another reservoir. If you needed more water, build another reservoir. The problem with climate change is that reservoirs aren't always full, so you have to have a diversity of water supply. And stormwater is magical in that it provides increased water security, but it also provides for the environmental benefits in terms of cleaning up water supply, cleaning up water discharges into waterways, cooling the city, and also making sure that the floods are managed in a proper way. So you can look at the traditional water supply systems, but when you add stormwater, you have much more flexibility in providing solutions for both resilience and livability. So stormwater has traditionally been the poor relation of water systems. It hasn't been regarded as a pure source of water. In fact, stormwater complements reservoir water, groundwater, desalination in a very positive way. You can provide water security by those traditional sources, but stormwater, if it's properly treated, can provide additional sources of water, but also, if it's properly treated, reduces the impact on downstream waterways in terms of the quantity of water flowing and the quality of water flowing. So I think we're now starting to realise that there's no single answer for our cities. It's not, every city is different. The solutions are different depending on the biophysical characteristics and depending on the socioeconomic characteristics of a city. The challenge is to look at that complexity and make something of it, and not to dismiss stormwater or dismiss desalinated water or they're all potentially solutions to the problem. Now this makes things more complex because in the past engineers have been able to say, I'm a specialist in stormwater, I'm a specialist in recycled water. Now you have to bring all these people together. You can no longer, professional people can no longer say, I am going to provide a recycled water solution. If that's not what's needed, then I don't want to be part of it. They have to be integrated in providing solutions and integrated with the urban planners from the outset. Well, I think there are a number of examples, and you don't have to go beyond Lyon to see some good things happening. The idea of the pervious city, which has been discussed today at this conference. This idea of, some people say the pervious city, some people say a sponge city, some people say the city as a catchment. What it really is making sure that water that falls on the city is captured and stays in it. It means that it reduces the amount of runoff, and in very dry climates it means it increases soil moisture and actually has a significant cooling effect. Now this is not a problem in this part of the world, but in places like California, parts of Africa and Australia, where temperatures can be very high, the temperature in the middle of the city can be 4 degrees higher than at the peri-urban or the rural part. And when that temperature is 30 degrees but goes up to 34 degrees, you are starting to have a big impact on public health and morbidity. There are many good examples that I could cite, and you don't have to go beyond Lyon itself to see some very good work being done here with the pervious cities concept, which is being discussed today. But I look at places like Rotterdam and Seattle, Suzhou in China, where they're applying the principle of capturing water in cities, whether it be by green roofs, in the case of Rotterdam, whether it be public plazas, water areas, which make a feature of stormwater capture. In China, they have a concept called a sponge city, which I think is a very good concept. You pour water on the city and it's absorbed like a sponge. A brilliant metaphor. In Melbourne and Australia, there's some also good work being done. The principle, of course, is though that it's holding the water in the city and it's being integrated with centralised water facilities. So it's not one or the other. The good work is where it's integrated, and that's happening in these places I've mentioned. Well, of course, we'd like to think that water-sensitive urban design is business as usual, as we say. You know, that when planners and designers looking at a city want to plan for the water system, they will automatically think of water-sensitive urban design because it's very efficient. But that's not the case. In many parts of the world, there's a resistance to doing that. And that's for a number of reasons. Sometimes the professional engineers or designers are more comfortable with the way they've always done things. Sometimes the decision makers, mayors, ministers, don't like the risk associated with doing something differently. Sometimes citizens don't understand. But I think the answer, the genius to solving this problem is to have a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So what is it we want our city to look like in 20 years' time? What role does water play? And inevitably, if you do that, you'll come back and you'll say, we all want water-sensitive urban design. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does require champions to go in this process. And that's why this conference, Novatech, is so important. We have 400 people who have one idea in mind, which is to provide sustainability in cities. We have to make sure that we talk to our decision makers so they understand, they buy into the dream, as it were.